Good evening, everyone. We're continuing with our wonderful exploration of the life of Christ. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am, reliving the places that we visited, but much more deeply, just going through the extraordinary story of the life of Jesus. So, let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to understand your wonderful life, that we may feel the power and the continuing energy that you are radiating out to the world. Help us to learn the lessons that your life presents, that we may rise as you rose, with courage and dedication, to follow God's guidance, to live in accordance with His will, and to realize ourselves as you realized, as one with the infinite Spirit. Om, peace. Amen. We're going to start this evening with Swamiji chanting, I will be thine always. And this is from his album, Kriyananda Sings Yogananda.
My Lord, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. I may go far, farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. Devotees may come, devotees may go. Devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. When I die, look into mine eyes. When I die, look into mine eyes. They will mutely say, I will be thine always. They will mutely say, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. I may go farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. My Lord, my Lord, I will be thine always. Devotees may come, devotees may go. Devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. When I die, look into mine eyes. When I die, look into mine eyes. They will mutely say, oh, they will mutely say, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. I may go far, farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always. Hari मैं तेरा हमेशा, हरि मैं तेरा हमेशा. दूर मैं जाऊं तारों मेरा, दूर मैं जाऊं तारों मेरा, लेकिन मैं तेरा हमेशा. हरि हरि मैं तेरा हमेशा.
Let's just take a moment of silence before we start. Om, peace. Amen. Oh my. That has to be one of the greatest pieces of music ever written. My goodness. It goes so far beyond anything. So, where we are in our saga of the life of Christ was his birth, then we took him to India for all of those 18 years of sadhana and of teaching and of maturation. Then he is called back to Israel, which is where his destiny really lies. Well, his known destiny. Actually, it'll be interesting to see as the ages, as we go up in age, how much those India years begin to sort of come forward a little bit more. So then he goes back to Israel, and he meets there John the Baptist at the Jordan River and is baptized by him. And then very interestingly in the Bible, it says immediately thereafter, and this evening there's a lot of Bible passages that we'll be reading about. Immediately after he was baptized, he went off to this high mountain, which was a place that became called the Mount of Temptation, and spent 40 days in the wilderness, is how they describe it. Now, in the context of Christianity, Jesus never had a sadhana. I mean, see, one of the things that happens by taking out those 18 years, yes, an avatar is born with a high state of consciousness, but they have to set an example. And they also enter into human life, and so they have to play out the drama of human life. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Master was an avatar. He was born free, but you still see his deep devotion and the extreme actions he takes to express that devotion, and his tapasya and his one-pointedness and all of these qualities, and also his discipleship, his going to be with Sri Yukteswar. When you see the life of Ramakrishna, he goes to all these lengths to express his love for God and his devotion, and he learns from people who come from Totapuri and from the woman sadhu who came, and he's always opening himself and showing us what it is to be a humble devotee, and also what it is to be on fire with love for God. In the life of Jesus, without those 18 years, we just have him be a remarkable child, and then he comes back as a fully formed adult and just acts out his story. And so among the reasons why Christianity is confusing is that we don't understand what the process of God realization is, because Jesus was a unique creation of God, and there's no reincarnation. There's no discipline to achieve. And so that makes it confusing. The other thing that makes it confusing is that Jesus has no sadhana and no guru, apparently. And so we don't know how to, again, we don't know how to understand how he became what he became. And among the many things that will be corrected by Master, as the true teachings of Christianity become, the true teachings of Jesus become known, is that we'll see that it's Sanatana Dharma in the same way. Much of that must have been acted out in India, and we can't know, but we can presume it. And that is also, I think, the explanation of why it was taken out of the Gospels, because what we don't know what might have been written in the Gospel. We have no idea what Jesus said to his disciples. How could they not have asked him? How could he not have told them stories? If he went back to meet the masters, the same wise men who came to him as a baby, he must have talked to them about his adventures there. So we have the Notovich scroll that I talked about when I was talking about Jesus in India, but that's just a summary of his life. It's not really the kind of story that a master would tell his disciples when they sat around the campfires at night, and all the illustrative stories and events that must have come from that. Also, we just don't know where it is. Maybe it occurs to me what will happen in higher ages is that lost manuscripts will be discovered. That would be the way that all that would be filled in. Best of all is that we would find contemporaneous writings. Maybe they're in the basement of the Vatican even as we speak. We don't know. Basement meaning symbolically the basement. They've been stored away and buried because Divine Mother is really in charge of all of this, not us. But we do have Jesus' 40 days in the wilderness. And so just to read out of the Bible, and just before this is that we had, "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased," and John baptizes him, and the dove appears, and I talked about that representing the spiritual eye. So now what we have is how the devil tempts Jesus, and the Bible says, "Then Jesus was led." So it means immediately, the way the story is told, immediately after he was baptized. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Of course, he went there for other reasons, but he was also tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." So what the temptation was to use his power for personal satisfaction. That now that you have all this power, you're hungry, well, make bread, you can do that. Now, of course, Jesus was perfectly capable of doing it, and it wasn't really, we call it tempting from the devil for what it represented. But the masters, great masters, rarely, almost never, pray for themselves. It's just they don't know how. Swamiji talked about that when he was suffering from terrible kidney stones and just was in agony from it. It was a Sunday morning. And he just couldn't bring himself to pray for himself. If God wanted to give him kidney stones, he was grateful to accept them. But then he realized that it was almost time for the Sunday service to start, and he wouldn't be capable of giving the service in that much pain. And at that time, he was the only one who gave services, and people, this was up at Ananda village, at the Ananda retreat, and people came from a long distance. And when Swami realized he might not be able to give the service, he said to Divine Mother, if you want me to give the service, I can't do it with this pain. And then he said, just like that, just as fast as you could imagine it, he said the pain absolutely disappeared. Because it wasn't a prayer for himself, it was a prayer for the people who were depending upon him. So Jesus could have easily manifested anything he wanted, but when the devil comes, it's do it for yourself. And he said, no, I don't need bread. I have the power of God in me. Why would I even need bread? So then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. I guess this is the origin of the statement that even the devil can quote scripture. Because here he is. Now, this is also a very important part of how delusion works with this. This is Swami's phrase was, the devil tries to, I'm just using the biblical phrase, but delusion, Maya, tries to insinuate itself into your mind by means of your own false reasoning. Because if the devil just appeared and said, I'm the evil one, and I want you to forsake all your aspirations and do what I say, who would listen to him? But he comes across quite reasonably. Look, it says here in the scripture, that you can just cast yourself down and God will protect you. Or, my, you're really hungry, aren't you? You need bread, you poor thing. Swamiji, just talking about satanic influence, when Swami was 77 years old in 2003, right after he finished writing Conversations with Yogananda, which emptied out the notebooks, all the notes Swami had taken of his life with Master, he felt finally he had published it. It was the path, self-realization, the essence of self-realization, conversations. He felt like an enormous amount of his life's work was done. And during that period of time, he felt many times that he was likely to leave his body at that point. But instead, he felt Master calling him to India. Swami had been waiting his whole life since 1962, since he was expelled from India and expelled from SRF. He'd been waiting to go back and start Ananda's work in India, and he never felt called. And finally, at that point, he felt called. And the whole story is told in Light Bearer, so I won't tell it all, but he invited about 6 of us to come over to Italy, Jyotish and David and me, Durga and Vidura, I think it was us, to talk about him going to India. And the decision was made. He'd already decided, really. He just invited us to see if we could think of a reason that he hadn't thought of as why he shouldn't go. That was often how he asked for advice. He wanted to give Divine Mother a chance to speak through someone else. But it was clear that he was going to do it. So things progressed, and the men went on to India to get things set up, and we were going to come a little bit later. Swami was going to come a step later than that. And Swamiji said, all of a sudden, he said this sort of voice started speaking in his head, and it was saying, you're "You're an old man. Your health is not good. You've been working so hard for so many years. It's really time for you to just take it a little bit easier. Don't you think that would be right?" And Swami said he just kept feeling like these thoughts coming to him, just so strongly, like, "You don't really have to do this. You've done plenty of your work for your guru. This is not necessary." And he could feel it like a satanic force just coming into him. And it was just it was taking away his resolution. It was making him feel weaker and more concerned about his health and his well-being. And he said it just took so much willpower to just push it out of him. So when we hear this story about Satan, don't just think that Jesus was just like not touched by it. It's presented as if, well, we all know the end of the story when we start the Bible verse. We know that Jesus didn't give in, but it's just Satan makes a bad suggestion, Jesus rejects him, and this is sort of, we want to elevate these beings to a very high level, which is true, but there's an element of human involvement, even with great saints. They're disappointed, they struggle, they have to put out willpower. Otherwise, as Master said quite simply, what kind of example would they be? So I'm not in any way trying to denigrate Jesus' absolute commitment. But think about the stories of St. Anthony in the tomb. He was meditating in that tomb for decades, but still, when the devil came and threatened him, Anthony had to hold on. Now, Anthony did hold on, but it wasn't casual. Maya really pushes, and even the great saints, they take on human characteristics. They triumph, but they don't triumph effortlessly. So Jesus is taken by Satan. It's actually, I'm going to show you some pictures in a few minutes of the Mount of Temptation. I didn't realize till reading it here that in the Bible it says that Jesus was spirited up to the Jerusalem temple and stood on the top of the temple and was, the devil tempted him down. I've stood on the balcony, which I'll show you the view of the Mount of Temptation, and I always thought that's where Jesus was going to hurl himself from. I think it's a small point, but I just had some clarity here. And then Jesus answered the devil and said, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Which is, you don't say, well, I'm just going to do this thing and I'll see if you'll save me. When these women, Master, there were 2 disciples of Master, women disciples, and they were very careless. The story Swami tells in the Path is they didn't lock their car even when there were valuable things in their car. And they just said, "Oh, Master will protect us." And when Master heard about it, he said, "Just see if I will." Meaning, why should I protect you when you're perfectly capable of taking care of yourself? And so why should I do something outrageous just to prove, that you will take care of me? I'm not going to challenge you like that. See if I will. There was a disciple also, a man who lived in our community for a period of time. He was a very good man with a lot of will. Swami thought he might actually develop into a good leader, but he became infatuated with something else. I don't remember. But he was going to leave Ananda, and he came to talk to Swamiji about leaving, and Swami didn't feel at that point that he had the right spirit. But still, Swami, for his own sake, tried to help him see that maybe he would be better off sticking with what he'd started. And as he was leaving, he said sort of airily, "Well, if Master doesn't want me to go, he'll stop me." And after the man walked out, I was in the room, Swami said to me, "Why would Master answer a prayer like that?" And that's what it means, like put him to the test. I'm just going to do what I want, and if you don't want me to do it, you can stop me. Sort of test God's power to intervene. That's what it is, to throw yourself off the cliff for no reason, except to test whether God's going to take care of you. You might be guided at some point to try that, but there would have to be a reason for it. In the story of the disciple of Babaji who was there, or the man who crawled up to the to the isolated place where Babaji and his followers were camped and wanted to be accepted as a disciple. This is one of the incredible stories in Autobiography of a Yogi. And Master said, you're not ready. Babaji said, you're not ready. I'm not going to accept you. And the disciple said, I have nothing to live for. If you want to accept me as a disciple, I'm going to just jump off that cliff. Babaji said, jump. So from the disciple's point of view, his guru had given him an instruction. So he jumped. And he died. He fell to the rocks and he died. Babaji said, go pick up his mangled body. So they went and picked up his mangled body and brought him to Babaji. And Babaji healed him and brought him back to life and said, now you're ready. What a test. But that was not at all what was being asked here. I'm not sure that I've quoted it exactly, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. The disciple said, I'm going to jump. The guru said, jump. Thinking I'm putting these words into it, but Babaji was his guru, and his guru had given him instructions, so he jumped. And maybe that was it, that life itself, I'll follow the guru to death. But this was the devil suggesting that Jesus jump, and there was no point in it, so he didn't. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not put the Lord your God to the test. Anyways, that's what I mean. Your faith has to be built on something else. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And the devil said, all this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Now you have to understand, it wasn't like the devil as the new king that he wanted Jesus to bow down to the devil himself. It was, this is the material world. And you can have mastery over the whole material world if you make that your God. If you bow down to worldly success, to wealth, to worldly power, if you make that your God, if you bow down to that, you can have it. You'll be able to do it. You can have it. So many people in the world want this. Yeah, go ahead, make it your God. And then Jesus said, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Other translations say, get thee behind me, Satan, which I've had Swami say to me on 2 different occasions. So it's very vivid to me that's how it's said. I'll explain that in a moment. Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended him. It's such a beautiful story there. Once I was traveling with Swamiji, we'd come back from Europe, and he was visiting and doing some programs in North Carolina, I think it was. There was a devotee there he went to visit. But he was very unwell, and there had been some confusion, and he was supposed to be able to go on an airplane, and instead he was going to have to take a 5-hour car trip, and I was being the mother bear protecting her cub. This is something I would get into with Swami sometimes. And I just wanted him to not do it. And I kept trying to persuade him that he didn't have to do it. He didn't have to take the car trip. We didn't have to, we didn't have to risk his health. We just didn't have to do it. And finally he looked at me, he said, get thee behind me, Satan. Oh, God Almighty. I said, I'm on the wrong side. He said, you're on the wrong side. He said, I'm going to keep my word. I said I was going to do it. Then he said, if I die trying, I'm going to keep my word. And on another occasion when he was I'm pointing to the Bhagavad Gita, but that wasn't it. He was doing television shows in India, like 2004, and he'd set himself such a schedule. And again, I said to him, I was trying to tell him, you don't have to. He said, I've set my will to this. Support me, don't undermine me. Yes, sir. I did it twice, but only twice, thank God. Okay. But that's what he's saying, get thee behind me. I've set my will to love God, and I'm not going to be deterred from this. There's so much. So there's, that's why the New Testament it just lives on and on and on, and will live as long as human beings are needing this kind of a testimony to learn from. You go into these stories, especially when you can bring to it a greater understanding from Sanatana Dharma, from Master's examples, from life with Swami. Then you can look right at these things, and where the power comes from, though, you see, is because it was an avatar. And once an avatar's consciousness, Master's, in talking about pilgrimage, Master said, wherever a master has been, his vibrations are there forever. I mean, that's really something to think about. And there's the incredible story. I mean, not incredible, that's the wrong word, but just the beautiful story. Master visiting the house where Dr. Lewis was living as a grown man, but it was also the house where he had lived as a child. It was the family home. Master was walking up the stairs, and he came to a landing where presumably where the stairs turned. Master stopped and said, someone had an experience of God here. I mean, Master was just a guest in Dr. Lewis's home. Someone had an experience of God here. And Dr. Lewis said that when he was 6 years old, he had a vision of an angel right on that spot. And Master was just walking. So it tells you that on one level, the Masters are living in the world we're living in, but well, just think about it for ourselves, how we can feel vibrations. When I went to Ananda for the first time, and I drove up to the meditation retreat, that was the first place at Ananda that I saw. And I opened the door and I put my foot on the ground, and I felt a spiritual power there. It came to me in these words, this place is true, which was the right words for my intuition, meaning this is what it seems. And it said it will not disappoint you. I put my foot on the ground, but it came right up out of the soil. Literally, I felt it like that. Because we have been exiled from our temple so much during this period of COVID, every time I step into that building, because I'm not there as much as I usually am, as soon as I step into it, it's like this is a holy place. When we first went into that building, when it was ours, when we took possession of it after we bought it, we moved from our storefront temple on California Avenue, which is just a few blocks away. And after a Sunday service, the last Sunday service in the storefront, we gathered up all the holy pictures and the statues, and we processed, about 25 or 30 of us, processed the 3 or 4 blocks, chanting, moved our temple, opened up the front doors, walked into the temple, and it was just like the Masters paraded in with us. It was so powerful. I'm sure if Master walked in, he could feel it. And just to finish that story, when we hung the altar, the first altar that we put up there, it's been remodeled since we hung the first altar, and I walked to the back of the temple, and I turned and I looked, and I saw the big pictures of the gurus just all there on the altar for the first time. And I felt an astral wind. That's the only thing I can call it. I felt an astral wind come off of that altar, blow over my head, and just blow out the front door. And just like, okay, now we're going to do it. You know, there's just these things are exceedingly real if we open ourselves to experience them, which is the whole point of pilgrimage. So this seems like a good place to show you the pictures of the Mount of Temptation, which I've had the extraordinary blessing of visiting on 3 occasions now, perhaps 4 occasions. All right, the Mount of Temptation is, let's see, let me get this straight. The Mount of Temptation is right next to the city of Jericho, and it's a very. Can we get my face off of there? Is that possible? Yeah, it's right next to the town of Jericho, and it's very low. It's right near the Dead Sea. It might be one of the lowest places on the earth. So the mountain that you see, just the bare mountain that goes up as a triangle, is where this monastery is located. Well, I think you can probably see it. I don't from where I'm sitting looking at the pictures. I don't think my glasses will. Nope, that makes it worse. You can see the little line of buildings up toward the top there. There's this incredible monastery just built right into the side of the mountain. And you come up to it by bus. Let's take another picture. I think, yes, there it is. That was the hill that we were looking at. You see it's Greek Orthodox, and it's built in the places, and we'll see when we go inside, there's caves. There are a lot of caves in that hillside. So all of this was very barren desert, of course, so that when Jesus went out into the wilderness, he really just went out to this, the phrase you normally use is God-forsaken, but it wasn't at all God-forsaken, but it was just a barren wilderness where he could have this extraordinarily deep silence. And climbing up that cliff, if it was anything like this, there were many caves. So it was easy for him to have his 40 days of fasting and meditation and whatever his inner experience was. It was very easy to be in silence and in isolation. And from that cliff, looking out, you can see the edge of the Dead Sea. So to get up to this nowadays, they have a cable car. So let's take the next picture. So you can see there's the whole city of Jericho on the edge of the Dead Sea there, and you come up in these cable cars. You can also walk up, but the cable car gives you the vista, and it sort of helps separate you from the world around you. So let's see the next picture. The cable car, just to be, the tour guide here, as we face the picture to the right, the hillside goes way over there, and the cable car lands, and you go through these. It's a fairly pleasant sort of a curio shop and a lovely restaurant where you can sit and you can look out over the town of Jericho. And then you still have to walk. You can see the pathway, and then it zigzags up. It's not that hard, but it's at least 100 steps that you have to get up in order to get there. Let's see the next. This is sort of, you can see coming up the zigzag stairs. So you get the tiniest feeling of what it must have been like to just have to walk up that thing without the benefit of the stairs. Let's go one more. And then you come to where you would be at the edge of that monastery. The monastery is the mountain on one side, and then they've sort of built out these little stone buildings, and then this very narrow hallway in between. Let's go on to the next corridor. It's just so it's so extraordinary to be against rock like that. Rock is, everything is conscious in the world, and rock is also conscious, but the solid power of it, the earth element, which is the first chakra, which is the steadfast loyalty to God, and especially this being the place where the drama of the devil trying to tempt Jesus away from that steadfast loyalty, that this all takes place, in the stone. And even the monastery, these wonderful little tiny individual cells for the monks, which are on the left side, which then look out over that, the vista that you saw from the cable car. It just, the whole atmosphere is wonderful. So let's take the next one. Just walking, this is still walking through the corridor. You can see it's just on the cliffside. There's no roof above you. There's cave rooms on the right and stone rooms on the left, and then one more. And then there's this very bigger cave, and then a smaller cave on the other side of it. Now it's all, of course, made civilized by the monks who live there. But it's very easy to imagine, because there's so much of the rock left, climbing up the bare rock, finding a cave like this, making your ashram, your temporary ashram for your 40 days in the wilderness, just sitting surrounded by the stone. And of course, whenever you go into a cave, immediately there's the Om. I mean, it's this deep silence and this profound separation from the world around you. Even in this setting, you could feel it. Let's go to the next picture now. at the end of this long corridor, we come, eventually the next one, we come to the end point where Jesus was said to have been sitting when he was tempted by the devil. Prior to that, we have this Greek Orthodox sort of chapel here, and one of the monks who's there and just watching. I've been to this place in different ways. I've managed to arrive on big holidays a couple of times where it was absolutely filled with people. And then I've managed to arrive when no one was there. So it's different experiences depending on which time you're there. But you can see this beautiful ornate. That's fine. You can turn the picture. Oh, this is a little smaller than I'd hoped. This is a very small chapel, which is at the end of the long corridors. This is the end of where the monastery ends. And what you're looking at on the right side, where you see that sort of curved thing at floor level, is said to be the rock where Jesus sat. That he was sitting on that rock when the devil came and tempted him. Let's come closer. We can see it better. There you can see it better in the artwork on the wall. And so you can come in and bow down. And I believe there's glass in front of it. You can't really put your hands on it. And this is a very small room, and opposite this, it's like a very small bedroom, you would say, or less. Opposite that, there's windows that look out over the valley, and the window sills are deep. And the monks walk around and ask you not to do things. But I've managed on several occasions to be able to sit in that windowsill for a very long time, where you are just right there, looking at the spot where Jesus was standing or sitting when he repudiated, so unequivocally, the forces of Maya that were trying to distract him from what God had given him to do. Now this next is what it looks like. This is, if you look at the bottom of the picture, you see those bars. This is a balcony we're standing on. The perspective on this is really, it's harder to see than I realized, but I hadn't really remembered that the devil took Jesus up to the top of the temple, and I was imagining him trying to throw me off this balcony, because this balcony is right outside where the rock is. You have to kind of twist your mind to see, but what you're looking is hundreds of feet down onto rock. And that would be, in potentially at least, what Jesus was surrounded by, and all there was for him to see. So now let's look at this painting. I love these. I love some of this artwork. So here we have the devil, and we have Jesus repudiating him once and for all, and the devil goes away, and the angels come to minister to Jesus. That's how the verse ends. And he's standing on what is supposedly the rock that we were just looking at, and all of the material world is at his feet, but he's choosing God instead. So with this image in front of us, let's listen to Swami's wonderful song called The Temptation of Christ. And there's a part of this song that, many of you are familiar with it, but just in case you don't know, the first voice is the voice of the devil. But it's so reasonable. If you've never heard the song before, you're not really sure who's talking to you. But the fact that it is so reasonable is why we get taken in. If it wasn't so reasonable, it would be very easy to refute. So first the devil, then Jesus, then the angels.
Behold all the wonders God's grace can bestow, if you but reclaim what you've given. Why not ask of God any wonder you crave? Worship me to satisfy all human needs. Dominion now over all this noble earth. All I ask ask of you is worship me. Get thee behind me, Jesus declared. Satan, know you not our Father offers love in your stead. His gift of love to all is my only food. He is all I own. What does man need but him?
Then the darkness lifted, love destroyed Satan's power. Then at last the Savior could begin bringing all to God. For he taught them in freedom, wanting not in return. All he offered was perfect peace, perfect freedom of soul.
God is all I love. He is all there is. Wise is he who says, I am wholly his. God is all I fear. Lo, my throne of power, shaken by his love, was destroyed in that hour.
Throughout all the world, a new spirit was born. Jesus brought to men's hearts hope for those steeped in sin.
God is all I loved. He is all there is.
Jesus brought to men's hearts hope for those steeped in sin.
God is all I loved. He is all there is. Wise is he who says, I am wholly his.
I write in Light Bear about the effect on Ananda, the effect Swamiji's creating the oratorio, which is the life of Christ in music, the effect that it had on the direction of Ananda. And every time I was going through this with all of you and listening to all these pieces and hearing them again in context, because Swami wrote this in the early 80s, around, 85, 86, I think, but right in there, mid-80s. And let me just think how to say this. Well, the way I wrote it in the book was, we did not have a self-realization way of approaching Jesus. We celebrated Christmas, we celebrated Easter, but it was always, the vibration of it was, at least, well, I mean, of course I was Jewish, but the Christians had even more trouble than I did. Those raised Christians, they just didn't know where to put it. And when Swami wrote this music, what he gave us was a vibration, because we all had the teachings already. We had bootlegged copies of Master's commentary on the Bible, so it wasn't like we didn't have a concept, but the vibration, we didn't quite have the vibration. So Swami took the pilgrimage himself with Rosanna. He wrote the oratorio. We all learned to sing it, and then others. Swami took a group himself back to Israel, and Jyotish and Devi did, and others did. We had a way suddenly to make Jesus our own, to approach it from the right angle. And every time, especially in the context of this class, every time I hear the oratorio, after focusing so much on it, and of course it was also true when I was in Israel, but there was so much else going on. It's more poignant here. I really feel what Swami was feeling, and he really translates it. He said himself, the inspiration I had in the Holy Land, he said, was complete in itself. I didn't need to translate it into music for myself. But he also said when he wrote the oratorio, it was the first time he wrote music to convey a vibration, is the way he said it. And you can, at least I can hear it, I hope you can too. When I listen to those songs, it's like I get the vibration of what happened there. Anyway, we're so fortunate. We have just such a rich, and we have so many resources for our spiritual life. Master said we only have to do 1% of what he gave us. I used to think it was 10%. Then I recently had to correct it down to 1%. But everybody will do a different 1%. That's why he has to teach so much. But listening to Swami chant at the beginning, listening to this song, that we have so many doorways into the spirit. And it's important for us to be creative. That's why he called it the art and science of Raja Yoga. It's like if one thing is not working, keep turning until you find something that does inspire us. We have very different periods and many years on the spiritual path. We turn this way, and then we turn that way, and then we turn this way. I remember once I had pictures of the masters on a shelf above the place where I slept in the trailer I was living in, and one night Babaji just fell off the shelf and just landed right on my chest. I mean, I'm not stupid. Okay, I'll pay more attention to you. All right, I'll do it. I have no idea why or where it came from. But we just move through this, and as long as we just keep freshening the inspiration, and with endless resources, if we don't make spiritual progress, it's not for lack of opportunity. So now, after Jesus comes back from being tempted by the devil, the way the gospel tells the story is that the first miracle he performed was at a wedding, and we're going to listen to Swami's song about that. But it was such a stark contrast to being 40 days in the wilderness, up on that barren hillside in one of those caves, just fasting and confronting. And this was, Jesus has now returned. Jesus only lives 3 more years after this. And he's already had this huge ministry in India. He's already planted his consciousness in a powerful, vibratory way in the land of India with his masters, in the Himalayas and all the things that we talked about. He goes through Egypt, according to Edgar Cayce. According to Edgar Cayce, he goes through Egypt with John the Baptist. They come back. John resumes his ministry, warning people, telling people that the Messiah is coming. Jesus steps there to be with John. This just tremendous force launching this is coming. Jesus immediately retreats to the mountaintop, 40 days, 40 nights. He just waits in the mountain. And now he begins. Because from this point forward, step by step by step, over a very short period of 3 years, he gathers his disciples, he trains his disciples, he gives them as much as they're able to receive, and then he's crucified, and that's the end of the story. Not long at all. And it all starts at a wedding. And so this is how the story is written in the Bible. On the 3rd day, after what? I don't know why. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place. Oh, these are this is a compilation of all the Gospels. That's why. So there's non sequiturs. Like on the 3rd day. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there. This is when we start bringing Mary into the story. Mary is a tremendous force in this story. One of the fruits of my pilgrimage trips was on a much deeper level to really appreciate the power of Mary in this world. So Jesus' mother was there. Of course, Mary was there when he was born, but she's been out of the story for a while. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus, and even just, I'm just stopping for a moment. There they are, they're at a wedding, and Jesus is there with his mother. He's been gone for all these years. Now bear in mind, again, and this context does not appear, what I'm about to say does not appear in the Bible, but it's important for us to understand it. Jesus was born into the Essene community. The Essene community was a very tight-knit spiritual family, and many people say it was a widely dispersed spiritual family, that India and Egypt and other parts of the world also had remnants. And this is, the Essene community is a preserved remnant from a higher age. And just like, I mean, again, I always use the image of Ananda when I'm talking about, to help us understand what the Essenes are. Of course, we're coming up from Kali Yuga, but Ananda as a worldwide network, and we have our people all over the world, and we are connected on a really profound level, and even also in a human level. We get the news, and we care about what happens with each other, and we stay in touch because it's very important to us to be able to do that. So Jesus was part of an Essene community. So he's back after this very long absence, but it's not likely that he was completely out of touch, because there were traders and merchants going back and forth, and the Essenes themselves going back and forth. You know, when Thomas gets word that Mary is ill and Mary is dying, and he comes back, and then he persuades many of the Essenes to come with him to go when he goes back to India. These are all previous conversations that we've had here. So now there's a wedding, and it's not like Jesus is a stranger. I mean, this is going to be a family wedding, and Jesus is back. And he knows all these people. And when we get to the section, which we probably will tonight, about Jesus beginning to find his disciples, no, we're probably not going to get to it till next week. You have to understand that he was known to these people. And it wasn't like he was a total stranger who just, I mean, the way the Bible makes it seem is that just like Jesus just was parachuted in and they'd never seen him before. But they knew all about him, and his birth was a miracle, and they all knew that, and they knew that he'd gone on a quest, and there was just so much more that was known. So the context of this wedding, you have to also understand, and maybe this is why, I mean, I'm just making this up, literally, but maybe this was a celebration of Jesus' return. The way the Bible tells it, Jesus appears at the Jordan, is baptized by John, goes off into the mountain. So when did his people welcome him home? So here's a wedding feast that may also be everyone's realization that he's returned. And think of the, extraordinary anticipation that everybody is feeling because of all the miraculous incidents associated with the life of Jesus. All of that has to be playing in. And undoubtedly, even though none of it is in the gospel anymore, he's talking about where he's been, the adventures he had, because his people were spiritual people. He wasn't like a solitary, God-seeking individual in a desert of materialism. He was part of this spiritual community which had held on to these high teachings for generations. And now he, this chosen son of this holy virgin, was there at that wedding. So much more must have been going on than just, oh, it's a party and they ran out of wine. So, but that's how the story is told. Even still, it's a lovely story, and Swami's song about it is extremely dear. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. In the gospel, we've already gathered up disciples, so I guess that tells me that this is not the minute after he comes off the mountain, but nonetheless, everything I said would probably still be true. When the wine was gone, actually it says that, Jesus and his disciples, so Jesus had already gathered disciples. But this is still considered to be the first miracle. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Jesus replied, "Woman, why do you involve me?" And you can just hear him say that. "Why are you telling me this? What do I have to do with wine? Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." This is also such a sweet story of Jesus listening to his mother. Maybe he's making up for the fact that he ran away to India. This is the fulfillment of that Bible verse that caused me to laugh so much, that Jesus went off with his parents and obeyed them. Maybe he's making it up for it now. But in fact, his mother did tell him to do this, because Mary was really a spiritual partner to him. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. That's a lot of wine. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. They must have. I love to make these things real. I mean, they're the servants. They've just filled these jugs with water. Jesus has passed his hand over them, and they've turned into wine. Now they get to carry the wine over to this guy, and this is all people. This is all happening, of course, in a marvelously uplifted way. But still, it's just people. When you read the book written by Yogananda's brother, Sananda Ghosh, it's called Mejda. Mejda is a Bengali, what do you call it, affectionate nickname for the older brother, or it's what the younger brother calls the older brother, Mejda. Master was he was a devilish little guy, and he had lots of fun with his power. He stuck his brother's hands to the wall, or somebody's brother's hands to the wall. He stopped his heart and pretended to be dead and scared one of the servants. I mean, he just did things. He had fun. And the people around him, had to participate in that. So here are the servants, and they know the water's been turned into wine, and they're giving it to this guy, and he doesn't know what's happening. So then then he called the bridegroom, the master of the banquet did, after tasting the wine, and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." The whole scene is so just ordinary. You wait till your guests are a little drunk, and then you give them the bad wine. You don't really quite know what to do with the whole story, but there it is. This is how it's reported. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Okay, now Swamiji has written a beautiful song for this one. His mission begins. And so there's both an instrumental and there's also a vocal for this. And there's no pictures to go with this. All of the pictures of the wedding feast that I could find were, I think our imaginations are better on this one than anybody's art. So let's just enjoy the beautiful picture of Christ and these wonderful songs of Swamiji's.
To show that his care was for men everywhere, Jesus started his mission at a wedding nearby. When wine there was spent, to the servants he sent, and requested them the jars with water to fill. Then many jars full of water were brought before him with care. He held his hand up in blessing, and the water turned to wine. To show that his care was for men everywhere. Jesus started his mission at a wedding nearby. When wine there was spent, to the servants he sent, and requested them the jars with water to fill. Then many jars full of water were brought before him with care. He held his hand up in blessing, and the water turned to wine.
That's so sweet. You can really feel a wedding feast in that, can't you? Just everybody dancing and singing and getting a little inebriated, apparently, and enjoying all the good wine. So be it. Now, in the progression of the life of Christ, and I have to make choices here. I can't do every word in the gospel, although I start slowing down and wanting to. But the next story that's the scholars try to figure out exactly what happened in what sequence, and so we're not sure. But a very, very dramatic story that is a very interesting contrast to the wedding and the wine is the story of Jesus going and driving the money lenders out of the temple. And this just sort of like takes us into a whole different aspect of the life of Jesus, which is not this sort of sweet and friendly and my mother wants me to make sure there's wine for all the guests. It's you may remember, and you can go back to the earlier classes, we had that model of the Jerusalem temple, and you could see on the hillside how huge and powerful and how dominating that temple is. And that's where, well, according to the gospel, that's where the devil transported Jesus not only to the top of the hill, but the top of the building that had all the power. But what had happened there, what was going on at the temple, and the way it was set up, it was a huge open-air courtyard, because of that was how buildings were, and that's the weather supported that. There was a huge open square there. And at that time, now these are various things, but the tradition in the temple was that animals were sacrificed. Among the many things, apparently, that the Essenes refused was animal sacrifice. And in fact, I believe it's in the Casey readings, there's this whole long explanation about how what was intended by that was not actually taking the life of animals, and this is the story that's told, is that you would make an effigy of an animal out of salt and flour and oil, and you would make it yourself. This is, again, I can't vouch for this. You would make it yourself, and it would represent whatever it was that you were trying to give up. And an animal, the idea of an animal would be your lower nature as opposed to your higher nature. And you would, as you would make it yourself, you would give over whatever it was that you were trying to dissolve to God. And then it was placed on a burning bowl, but with the oil in it, the whole thing just disintegrated. So it was a very symbolic gesture. It was never meant that animals should be slaughtered. I mean, it's such a barbaric thing. Why would you take the life of innocent creatures? And what kind of a God would want you to be doing that? So it's part of what sometimes makes the Old Testament so hard to understand, is because everybody's always slaughtering something and taking the blood, and human beings are always the same. It's not like the fundamental human nature changes. So we have compassion for innocent creatures, and slicing the throat of something and having it die in front of your eyes and bleed out in front of you. These are not uplifting experiences. So this is, again, where civilization decays, and the Essenes kept contact with the true teachings of Moses, because Moses was an avatar and really kept many of the aspects alive, and that's what kept them separate from the society around them. Again, think of Ananda. We just live so differently. I was, one very late night, I was driving home from Ananda village on Saturday night. This was my habit when Swami Kriyananda was living at the village, and often they would have these wonderful weekend events, and Swami would do something marvelous on Saturday night, but I would volunteer to come back to Palo Alto and put on the Sunday service the next morning. So it was my habit that I would stay through Saturday night, whatever Swami was doing. So at 9 or 10 o'clock, I'd get in my car and then drive back to Palo Alto, which was a 4-hour drive. And there was one particular part of the road that I had discovered was very bumpy, but there were parts of it that were less bumpy. And this was like my habit to take this ride. So I'm on that road like about 1 in the morning. The road's completely empty, and I keep changing lanes because I'm looking for where it's not going to be so bumpy. And all of a sudden, there's a policeman behind me, pulling me over. And why is he pulling me over? And then I realized, anyway, he pulls me over. We stop and we start talking. He starts asking me questions like, who is the president? And what day is it? And just things like that. And I'm looking at him like, what is this about? Then I finally realized it's 1 in the morning. I'm weaving all across the highway. So I sort of laughed and I said, oh, you think I'm drunk? And then I thought for a moment and I said, the last time I had an alcoholic drink was 1965. I said, and he looked at me, I said, you weren't born in 1965. I said, was your mother born in 1965? I said, I'm not at all drunk, and we just went on from there. But it was just one of those moments where I totally understood that I have lived my whole life somewhere else from where society is living. It's not the same. The world that we live in is not the same. We hold an entirely different set of values, and we hold ourselves to those values. I was in a restaurant once in Sacramento, just randomly, And I was sitting there with Seva, my friend from the village, and I just had this feeling all of a sudden. I said, if you and I manifested in our physical bodies how exotically different we are in our minds from all the people in this restaurant, I said they would start screaming that aliens had landed because we're just living in another reality. So, okay, here's Jesus and the Essenes in general, but here's Jesus also. And he's come here to really confront this, what has become of the teachings of Moses. Because he was the avatar to the Jewish people, and it was those who called him, those who were choosing God. But what had happened, and this is the only way you can really say this without feeling anti-Semitic, which is, of course, the last thing that we're going to be. It was a corrupt priesthood. Whatever it called itself, it didn't matter what it was called. It was a corrupt priesthood, because running that temple had become exceedingly lucrative. And they had started making all kinds of other rules that really made it more and more lucrative, okay? They talk about the money lenders. I talked about the animal sacrifice. There was a whole marketplace in all kinds of animals going on there. I mean, there was a story somewhere in here about, buying pigeons because they couldn't afford a lamb. But you had all these choices, and if you were wealthy, you bought these big, expensive animals, and you took them into the priest, and they were ritually slaughtered, and this was supposed to do something. I mean, presumably the meat was at least used to feed people, I don't know. But it was a big business. And people traveled long distances to come to the temple because it was considered auspicious, and it may even have been required in the canons of all the laws they had to follow, that they had to sometimes come to the Jerusalem temple, and only certain things could be done at the Jerusalem temple. And so you're traveling a long distance, you can't bring all your live animals with you. But when you arrive up there, and it's necessary to have these animals, it's the required way for you to practice your religion, is that you have to be able to offer these animals. So who's going to provide the animals? And they're not going to provide them for free. And also, you see, it's a captive market because you have to have them, and there you are, you've come from a distance, and you have to buy them. So prices were not cheap, and people saw opportunities. And of course, not all of them were evil or greedy, but nonetheless, suddenly, and this reminds me just a little of what my Indian friend said to me when we were first learning about the customs of India, when we were traveling there at the first time. So much of it was fascinating to us. Our friend, who was in business and was rising in his business as a tour guide, he bought an apartment, and they didn't have the system then where you could take a mortgage. You had to, I'm not sure whether they do or not even now, but he had to pay had to buy the entire apartment before he was allowed to move in. So that was the cycle. First, he had to generate the money to pay for it. Then he couldn't move into it for 5 months because the astrologically auspicious day to move in was several months later. And then at the astrologically auspicious time, he had to bring the priests in. And this is where he said to me, Hinduism is the only religion where you have to pay someone else to practice it. Because the rituals were so complicated, they had to be learned, and it was a business for the pujaris. I don't fault them, but that's just how it came down to. It was a business for the pujaris to come in and do the house dedication, and they lit a fire inside the house, and they broke coconuts against the wall. So after it was dedicated, he had to clean it up and repaint it. This is all, being told to us. We're just listening like, oh, wow, that's a lot. And he said it was just out of the question that he would not do that. I mean, he had to do it. It wasn't an option to not do all of those things. Well, that was just, a few decades ago. We're talking about what's going on at this temple. So there was all of that marketplace. You have made of my father's house a house of business. Then there were the money lenders themselves, the money changers, that was the word. The coin of the realm was Roman, And it was the habit of the Romans to stamp the image of one of their emperors on their coins. So it became a graven image. You know, it was thou shalt not thou shalt not put other people's faces and worship them. So the coins, the Roman coins, were considered unacceptable in the temple because they were pagan and they were a graven image that was being worshipped in a sense. And so they couldn't be placed in the temple. So whatever money you brought in, it had to be changed for temple money. And of course, there was a little bit of a fee involved in doing that, or a big fee. So it's one thing that you had to buy the animal that you couldn't carry, but now your own money has to be changed before it's acceptable to the priests. And so the money changers are just sitting there doing nothing except just taking a fee all day long. And all of this has, because of the corrupt priesthood who benefited from all of this, both power and money also, think of all the control they're exercising over all these people. This is what happens. This is why the avatars, whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I, the infinite spirit, take visible form. That's why Jesus came, because Judaism is a true and beautiful religion, and it's Sanatan Dharma in its essence, and is being practiced as Sanatan Dharma. We recently, as one of the Palo Alto offerings, had this wonderful Abraham, this wonderful man we met in Israel, who his Judaism is the same as our Sanatan Dharma. We're just the same on this, because the truth of it was there, but this corrupt priesthood had a hold of it. And so Jesus wasn't going to come in and just say, excuse me, but maybe this isn't a good idea, because there was no possibility. So he goes to the wedding and he just changes water into wine and everybody's so happy. He goes to the temple, and I will start here next week. He goes to the temple and he picks up a whip, is how it's described, and he starts driving the money changers out of the temple. He creates a riot. They're there because the priests have authorized them being there. And Jesus comes in, and you must know that he brought the power of the divine in there to be able to do this, to drive these money changers out of the temple, because you are polluting and corrupting my Father's house. So it was a fairly bold beginning, I would say, or whenever it took place. He was not cowed by the power, and he was not frightened of their revenge. He was sent by God, and that's what he was going to do. So we'll go into that story next week, but before that, we will close with Swamiji singing the St. Francis prayer. We have a recording of his voice on it, so let's enjoy that, and that will be the end of our class.
Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee, all our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee, all our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us
us each a channel of thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we soothe thy